When you were a child, before the world taught you what things were for, everything was worth investigating. Snails on pavements, cracks in walls, the pattern on a butterfly's wing, the way ice forms on a window. At some point, most of us stopped looking that closely. We grew up. We learned to walk past things without stopping. George de Mestral never stopped. At 34 years old, a fully grown, fully qualified Swiss engineer, he came home from a walk in the woods, looked at the burrs stuck in his dog's fur, and reacted the way a 7-year-old would. He got on his knees, he picked one up, and he asked, genuinely, with full curiosity, "How does this work?" 14 years later, that question was worth 60 million yards a year. This is what happens when a grown man refuses to stop seeing the world like a child. By the end of this, you'll understand exactly why one of the most useful inventions of the 20th century came from a dog walk in the Swiss Alps, and why the people who were supposed to see it first laughed him out of the room. It's 1941, the Alps, a Sunday morning that should have meant nothing. George de Mestral is an engineer by training, an inventor by obsession. He's the kind of man who, at 12 years old, designed and filed a patent for a model aircraft. Not just built one, patented one at 12. So when he returns home from a walk in the Jura Mountains, his Irish pointer covered in burdock burrs, and he sits down to pick them off. What he does next tells you everything about who he is. He doesn't just pull them off. He picks one up. He holds it to the light. He rolls it between his fingers, slow, deliberate, beat by beat. And then he does something almost nobody in human history had done before him. Despite every single person who had ever walked through a field having the exact same opportunity, he puts it under a microscope. What he sees stops him cold. Hundreds of tiny hooks, perfectly formed, each one curved at the very tip, as if shaped by an engineer, designed to catch on anything with a loop or a fiber. The burdock plant had spent millions of years evolving this system, a self-fastening mechanism so precise, so elegant that no human had ever thought to reverse engineer it until now. De Mestral sits back, looks at what he's holding, and thinks a thought that changes everything. I can build this. Here's where most invention stories say, and then he built it and everyone celebrated. That is not what happened. De Mestral took his idea to the textile industry in Lyon, France, at the time the most advanced weaving community in the world. He walked in with burrs, a microscope slide, and a vision. They laughed at him. Not politely. Not with gentle skepticism. They laughed. One weaver helped him only in secret, too embarrassed to be publicly associated with the idea. But the textile rejection was only the beginning. When de Mestral eventually got the mechanism working well enough to show fashion houses, the people who actually put fasteners on clothing, he hit a wall of a completely different kind. It wasn't that they didn't believe it worked. It was that they found it hideous. The rough, bristled texture, the fuzzy, unfinished look of the loop side, to an industry built on elegance, on hidden craftsmanship, on the invisible perfection of a well-placed button. Velcro looked cheap. It looked like a mistake, useful perhaps, beautiful, absolutely not. So de Mestral found himself rejected on two fronts simultaneously, by engineers who doubted it could be made, and by designers who doubted anyone would ever want to look at it. For 8 years of failure, rebuilding, and starting again, he worked through problem after problem. Most people, after the first rejection in Lyon, would have walked away. De Mestral kept asking why it wasn't working yet. The answer finally came from nylon, processed under infrared light, which produced hooks durable enough to survive thousands of open and close cycles without degrading. He filed his patent in 1955. He named it by combining two French words, velours, meaning velvet, and crochet, meaning hook, Velcro. The fashion houses still didn't want it, but as it turned out, the people who did want it operated at a very different altitude. While the fashion world was busy deciding that Velcro was too ugly to touch, NASA had a problem that made aesthetics completely irrelevant. In zero gravity, nothing stays where you put it. Tools float, food pouches drift. Equipment meant to be fixed to a surface simply isn't. During the Apollo program in the 1960s, NASA's engineers needed a fastening solution that was fast, reliable, and required no precision under pressure. Ideally one that an astronaut in a bulky pressurized glove could operate without thinking. Velcro was the answer. It went from being laughed out of Lyon fashion houses to being sewn into the suits of the men walking on the moon. Today it holds hospital monitoring equipment, military gear, sports bracing, and the shoes of every toddler whose fingers aren't quite ready for laces yet. Every astronaut who has ever left this planet has relied on it. The global hook and loop fastening market is now worth over $1 billion a year. All of it traces back to one man who refused to treat a Sunday afternoon as ordinary. Here's what strikes me most about this story. The burr didn't change. It was the same burr that had been catching on human clothing for 10,000 years. The microscope already existed. The textile industry was already there. The only ingredient that wasn't already present, the only new variable in the entire equation, was a man who had never learned to stop being curious. Most of us are trained, somewhere between childhood and adulthood, to see the world as a collection of things we already understand. We stop asking how and start asking what for. De Mestral never made that trade. And the irony is that the very quality his colleagues laughed at, the wide-eyed, slightly obsessive need to understand why a burr sticks, was the exact quality that made him the only person in history to look at something every human had encountered for thousands of years and turn it into something entirely new. Curiosity is not naive. It's just rare. So here's the question I want to leave you with. What's the burr in your life that you've been pulling off and throwing away without ever once asking why it sticks? Drop it in the comment section. And if you want another Origin Unlocked next week, subscribe.